In tough times, our grandparents and great-grandparents knew how to make the most of what little they had. Their creativity in the kitchen wasn't just about keeping bellies full. It created some truly delicious combinations that have largely been lost to time. These 25 forgotten poor man's sandwiches might sound strange today, but they carried families through the Depression, wartime, and beyond. Let's rediscover these forgotten sandwiches you'll wish you knew sooner. Bologna sandwich. The bologna sandwich stands as perhaps America's most iconic budget meal. Thin slices of this processed meat on white bread with a smear of yellow mustard fed countless workers and schoolchildren throughout the 20th century. During the Great Depression, bologna became known as poor man's steak, affordable when real beef was out of reach for many families. A single slice could stretch across bread, create the illusion of abundance. The best versions featured slightly fried bologna with its edges curled up from the heat, creating a perfect pocket for mustard and mayonnaise. What made this sandwich special wasn't fancy ingredients but small touches. Some families would score the edges to prevent curling, others would fry it until crisp. The bologna sandwich wasn't just food, it was reliable comfort during uncertain times, when knowing lunch would be there tomorrow mattered more than culinary excitement. But did you know the history of this humble sandwich gets even more interesting? Wait till you hear about our next creation that took making do to a whole new level. Sugar sandwich. When cupboards were nearly bare, the sugar sandwich emerged as a sweet treat that cost almost nothing. 2 slices of bread, a thin spread of butter or margarine, and a sprinkling of sugar created a simple dessert that delighted children during the hardest times. During the Great Depression, treats were rare luxuries, but parents found ways to create special moments with almost nothing. The sugar sandwich became a birthday treat or reward when there was no money for cake or candy. Some families added a drop of vanilla extract or cinnamon when available, transforming this basic combination into something that felt special. What makes this sandwich remarkable is how it reminds us that even in deepest poverty, parents found ways to create moments of joy and normalcy for their children. Depression-era kids who grew up with sugar sandwiches often continued making them for their own children, not out of necessity but as a connection to family traditions. Think that sounds simple? Wait until you discover how creative our grandparents got with just 2 ingredients for our next sandwich. Onion sandwich. Raw onion between bread slices might sound like punishment, but this pungent sandwich sustained countless workers during the early 20th century. Cheap and available year-round, onions provided flavor and nutrition when little else was affordable. The key was slicing the onion paper-thin, soaking the slices briefly in cold water to remove some bite, then patting them dry before placing between bread spread with butter or drizzled with a bit of vinegar. Salt and pepper finished this humble meal that packed surprising flavor. Coal miners and factory workers carried these in lunch pails, the strong smell preventing others from stealing their meals. The sandwich also delivered energy through simple carbohydrates and kept winter colds at bay with the onion's natural antibacterial properties. What began as a necessity became preference for many who developed a taste for the sandwich's sharp simplicity. Today, chefs at high-end restaurants sometimes serve variations of this working-class staple, recognizing its perfect balance of sharp flavor and satisfying texture. The next sandwich might sound even stranger, but it became so beloved that even a famous rock star couldn't resist it. Mayonnaise and banana sandwich. The marriage of creamy mayonnaise and sweet bananas might sound strange to modern ears, but this unlikely combination fed many Southern families during hard times. The sandwich offered cheap protein from the mayo and needed fruit nutrients from affordable bananas. Depression-era mothers would carefully slice ripe bananas lengthwise, laying them flat on white bread, spread with just enough mayonnaise to add richness without overwhelming the fruit's natural sweetness. Some added a sprinkle of sugar or honey when available for special occasions. Elvis Presley famously enjoyed a variation with peanut butter added. The contrast between creamy, tangy mayonnaise and sweet, soft banana created a surprisingly balanced flavor profile that many remember fondly from childhood, even after their circumstances improved. Southern food historian John T. Edge has documented this sandwich in his works on American food culture, noting how it represents the creativity born of scarcity. Many who try it today are surprised by how the mayonnaise's tanginess perfectly complements the banana's sweetness. You won't believe what simple ingredient became the star of our next Depression-era classic, ketchup sandwich. When the cupboard was truly bare, the ketchup sandwich emerged as a last resort that somehow became beloved by children. 2 slices of bread with nothing but ketchup spread between them. This sandwich embodied making something from almost nothing. During the Depression, ketchup provided both flavor and slight nutrition from tomatoes when fresh vegetables were unaffordable. Parents would sometimes toast the bread to make the simple meal seem more substantial. Some added a sprinkle of sugar to enhance the ketchup's sweetness, creating an approximation of dessert. School cafeterias occasionally served these during the 1930s. Depression-era children grew up with these sandwiches, and many continued making them even after prosperity returned. Comfort food that connected them to their resilient past. Food historian Andrew F. Smith notes in his book, Pure Ketchup, that the condiment's popularity soared during economic downturn precisely because of its versatility as both condiment and main ingredient. The next sandwich takes us to rural America, where nothing went to waste, especially when it came to precious fats. Lard sandwich, perhaps the most humble of all poor man's sandwiches, the lard sandwich represents bare-bone sustenance. A spread of rendered animal fat on bread provided calories when nothing else was available. Appalachian families and rural poor relied on this simple combination for quick energy, sometimes enhanced with a sprinkle of salt or sugar, depending on whether a savory or sweet meal was desired. Lard sandwiches were filling, if not nutritionally complete. Those with access to home-rendered lard claimed superior flavor to store-bought varieties. Some families added a thin scraping of molasses on special occasions. The sandwich's high caloric density made it popular among physical laborers who needed substantial energy to make it through demanding workdays. Appalachian Food Authority Mark F. Sohn has documented how these sandwiches were packed in lunch pails for coal miners who needed high-energy food that could withstand hours in dark mine shafts without refrigeration. What refreshing creation did poor families enjoy during hot summer months? You'll find out next. Cucumber sandwich. Though later associated with fancy afternoon tea, the cucumber sandwich began as humble fare. Thin sliced cucumbers between bread provided hydration and refreshment to workers in hot weather when meat was unaffordable. Depression-era families made these with garden cucumbers in summer months, adding a thin spread of butter and salt. The cool crispness offered refreshment during hot days, particularly for farm workers. Some enhanced them with dill or vinegar when available. Unlike many poor man sandwiches that provided calories, cucumber sandwiches offered psychological refreshment, the feeling of eating something fresh and green when most meals were heavy and starchy. They represent how even in poverty, people found ways to create moments of delight. Food writer Elizabeth Sandifer notes that while the British upper classes enjoyed these as tea sandwiches with crusts removed, American workers ate heartier versions, with thick cucumber slices and uncut bread, demonstrating how the same basic food adapted to different social circumstances. Our next sandwich celebrates the height of summer bounty and has remained a regional favorite to this day. Tomato sandwich. When summer gardens yielded their treasure, the tomato sandwich celebrated seasonal abundance amid year-round scarcity. Garden-grown tomatoes sliced thick onto bread with salt and pepper created a seasonal treat that cost almost nothing. Southern families perfected this sandwich with a light spread of mayonnaise, while Midwestern versions often featured butter instead. The key was using tomatoes still warm from the sun, their juices soaking slightly into the bread to create a messy but glorious eating experience. During garden season, this sandwich might be eaten daily until frost-ended tomato season. The anticipation of first summer tomatoes and the rituals of preparing the sandwich became cultural touchstones in many rural communities, where this simple meal represented both poverty and abundance simultaneously. Southern food writer and historian Ronnie Lundy has documented how the tomato sandwich became almost ceremonial in Appalachia, and the South, the first perfectly ripe tomato of summer, deserved nothing more than good bread, salt, and maybe a touch of mayonnaise to honor its perfection. Would you dare try the next unlikely food pairing that sustained families through hard times? Peanut butter and pickle sandwich. This unusual pairing of creamy peanut butter with tangy, crunchy pickles created a surprisingly balanced flavor combination that stretched modest ingredients. Depression-era cooks discovered that the sharp acidity of pickles cut through the richness of peanut butter perfectly. Dill pickles were most commonly used, though sweet pickles appeared in regions where they were home-canned. The contrast of textures, smooth peanut butter against crisp pickle, added interest to an otherwise monotonous diet. This sandwich remained popular through the 1950s, particularly in rural areas where both ingredients were readily available through home canning and affordable staples. Depression-era children often continued enjoying these sandwiches into adulthood, the flavors connecting them to childhood even after their circumstances improved. The New York Times food section revived interest in this combination in 2012 with an article noting that peanut butter and pickle sandwiches had been mentioned in their pages as far back as 1938, confirming its place in American culinary history. The next sandwich revolutionized lunchtime when a new, affordable protein became widely available: tuna salad sandwich. When canned tuna became widely available in the early 20th century, it revolutionized budget eating. Mixed with mayonnaise and perhaps finely chopped celery or onion, tuna salad stretched a small amount of protein across multiple sandwiches. During World War II, with meat rationing in effect, tuna salad sandwiches became patriotic alternatives to beef. Navy wives particularly embraced these sandwiches, adding relish or hard-boiled eggs when available to extend the filling further. Churches and community gatherings often featured these sandwiches since they could feed many for little cost. The tuna salad sandwich represents community resilience, how shared knowledge about stretching ingredients helped neighborhoods weather hard times together. Culinary historian Laura Shapiro has documented how women's magazines during the 1940s promoted tuna as a patriotic choice that helped support the war effort while feeding families nutritiously. During rationing, creating a generation of Americans who grew up viewing tuna as a staple rather than a sacrifice. How did a military ration become a beloved staple that's still popular today? Find out next. Fried Spam Sandwich. When Spam hit markets in 1937, it provided an affordable meat alternative during Depression and wartime rationing. Thinly sliced and fried until crisp-edged, Spam on bread became a working-class staple. Military personnel during World War II consumed enormous quantities of Spam, bringing their taste for it home after the war. Often dressed with mustard or mayonnaise, the sandwich's popularity transcended its necessity origins. Hawaiian communities embraced Spam during military occupation, creating regional variations that persist today. The Spam sandwich represents how wartime necessity foods became cultural touchstones, remembered not just for their utility, but for their connection to historic moments of sacrifice and resilience. According to the Hormel Foods Corporation, which produces Spam, over 8 billion cans have been sold worldwide since its introduction, demonstrating how a product born of hard times became a global culinary phenomenon that transcended its humble origins. The next sandwich combined two protein sources to create maximum nutrition from minimal ingredients: egg and sardine sandwich. When protein was scarce but essential for physical labor, the egg and sardine sandwich delivered maximum nutrition from minimal ingredients. Canned sardines mashed with hard-boiled eggs and a touch of vinegar created a filling rich in protein and omega-3 fatty acids. Immigrant communities particularly embraced this combination, drawing on European traditions of fish preservation. The sandwich traveled well in lunch pails for factory workers and miners, providing sustained energy through long shifts. Some versions added finely chopped onion or pickles when available. The egg and sardine sandwich stands as testimony to nutritional wisdom in poverty, how people instinctively combined complementary proteins even before nutritional science confirmed the practice's value. Food historian Harvey Levenstein has noted that while Americans initially resisted preserved fish like sardines, economic necessity during the Depression led to wider acceptance, with recipes like this sandwich helping families survive on limited budgets while maintaining protein intake. How could one strip of bacon flavor an entire meal? Bacon drippings sandwich. When meat was severely rationed during wartime, resourceful cooks saved every drop of bacon grease in a can by the stove. This precious fat became the basis for the bacon drippings sandwich. Bread. Spread with solidified bacon fat and topped with salt and pepper. Unlike the lard sandwich, bacon drippings carried the smoky, salty flavor of bacon itself, creating the illusion of eating meat when actual bacon was unavailable. Some added a sprinkle of chopped green onions from the garden or a dash of vinegar to cut the richness. Families in the rural South particularly relied on this sandwich, where the tradition of saving bacon grease for cooking remained common practice. Well into the 1980s, the sandwich represents the waste not, want not philosophy that guided American kitchens through multiple economic downturns. Southern food authority John Egerton documented this practice in his classic work, Southern Food, noting how bacon drippings were considered so valuable they were often passed down from mother to daughter as part of kitchen wisdom. Our next sandwich shows how even the cheapest vegetables could become a satisfying meal. Mayonnaise and onion sandwich. Sharp raw onion, tamed by creamy mayonnaise, created a sandwich that delivered bold flavor when other ingredients weren't available. Thinly sliced onions were sometimes soaked briefly in water to reduce their bite before being layered with mayo between bread slices. Factory workers favored this inexpensive filling option that provided enough energy to sustain physical labor. The sandwich became particularly associated with Southern textile mill employees and Midwestern manufacturing workers. Some added a sprinkle of black pepper or paprika when available. The mayonnaise and onion sandwich represents working-class pragmatism, functional food that prioritized sustenance and affordability over culinary trends. Labor historian Jefferson Cowie has noted that factory lunchrooms in the early 20th century often smelled of onions, as workers across industries relied on this affordable vegetable to add flavor and substance to simple lunches that could withstand hours without refrigeration. The next sandwich might be the ultimate comfort food, turning the most basic ingredients into something that felt like dessert, bread and milk sandwich. Perhaps the most elemental comfort food, bread soaked in sweetened milk, became a sandwich of last resort that somehow transcended its poverty origins. Slices of bread dipped in milk, sprinkled with sugar, and pressed together created a sweet, soft meal for those with few alternatives. During the Depression, parents often served these as dessert to children who had no access to proper sweets. Sometimes cinnamon was added when available, creating an almost cake-like experience from bare staples. The bread and milk sandwich appears in Depression-era memoirs as both emblem of hardship and symbol of parental love, how mothers and fathers transformed complete basics into experiences of comfort for their children during the bleakest times. Author Studs Terkel's oral history, Hard Times, includes numerous references to bread and milk combinations as both regular meals and treats during the Depression, showing how widespread this simple solution became during America's worst economic crisis. What happened when one chicken needed to feed a family for days? The answer involves impressive culinary ingenuity. Chicken salad sandwich. When a single chicken needed to feed a family for days, The chicken salad sandwich represented the final stretching of that precious protein. After roasting for Sunday dinner and using leftovers for Monday soup, remaining bits were chopped finely and mixed with mayonnaise, stretching the meat across multiple lunch sandwiches. Depression-era and wartime cooks added diced celery, apples, or hard-boiled eggs to extend the mixture further. The finer the chicken was chopped, the further it would stretch, creating an economy of scarcity that nevertheless delivered protein and satisfaction. Church social events often featured these. Sandwiches with crusts removed and cut into triangles, transforming everyday sustenance into occasion food without additional expense. The chicken salad sandwich represented resourcefulness and respect for food, ensuring not a single scrap of precious meat went to waste. Home economics historian Caroline Hungerford has documented how government pamphlets during both world wars offered detailed instructions for stretching a single chicken across multiple meals, with chicken salad as the final transformation of the bird. But what about when chicken wasn't available at all? The answer might surprise you. Mock chicken sandwich. When chicken was unaffordable, creative cooks developed mock chicken from cheaper ingredients, usually based on coarsely ground bologna or other inexpensive processed meats mixed with cracker crumbs and seasoning. This spread mimicked the texture and flavor of chicken salad. Factory cafeterias and school lunchrooms served these during wartime meat rationing. The convincing flavor came from careful seasoning with sage, celery salt, and sometimes a drop of yellow food coloring to mimic the buttery color of chicken salad. Some variations used cooked beans as a base instead of meat. The mock chicken sandwich represents culinary ingenuity, how creative cooks refuse to accept deprivation, instead reinventing desired foods from available ingredients. Food historian Sarah Lohman has tracked similar mock foods through American history, noting that they often became beloved in their own right rather than being viewed as substitutes. Mock chicken salad being one of the most successful examples that survived long after rationing ended. The next sandwich might seem ordinary today, but it began as careful resource management. Ham and cheese sandwich. Though now considered unremarkable, the classic ham and cheese sandwich began as careful management of precious resources. Deli ham, sliced paper thin, and a single slice of processed cheese could be spread across multiple sandwiches when necessary. Depression-era mothers might use a single slice of each to create sandwiches for an entire family, sometimes bulking them out with lettuce or mayo. The combination provided complete protein when meat alone was too expensive to consume in quantity. Some families would collect cheese rinds to melt into a spread that went further than sliced cheese. The ham and cheese sandwich represents calculated nutrition, how people instinctively combined complementary proteins to create complete meals during scarcity. According to the National Historic American Food Project, processed cheese slices, first patented by James Kraft in 1916, gained popularity precisely because they could be sliced thinner than natural cheese and had a longer shelf life, making them perfect for stretching during hard times, when nothing was wasted. Even the most unusual parts of animals became sandwich fillings. Chicken liver sandwich. When nothing of the chicken could be wasted, livers became sandwich filling that provided exceptional nutrition at minimal cost. Cooked and finely chopped with onions, then mixed with a little mayonnaise, chicken livers, created rich, iron-packed sandwiches. Rural families who raised their own chickens particularly relied on these sandwiches as a way to use every part of the bird. Sometimes enhanced with hard-boiled eggs or relish, the spread was both economical and highly nutritious. Farm children often carried these in lunch pails, benefiting from concentrated nutrition during growing years. The chicken liver sandwich represents sustainable eating before it became fashionable, using whole animal approaches out of necessity rather than culinary trend. Nutritionist and food historian Marion Nessler points out that organ meats like liver Once staples of American diets, provided far more nutrients than muscle meats, making them particularly valuable during economic hardship when overall food intake might be limited. Our next sandwich uses a surprisingly small amount of an intensely flavored ingredient, anchovy paste sandwich. When even a small tube of anchovy paste could flavor multiple meals, this pungent sandwich became a working-class standby. Spread thinly on buttered bread, sometimes with sliced hard-boiled egg when available, anchovy paste provided intense flavor and omega-3 fatty acids. Immigrant communities from Mediterranean regions particularly embraced this sandwich, maintaining food connections to their homelands even in poverty. The strong flavor ensured satisfaction even with minimal application. Some added thin sliced onion or lemon juice when available. The anchovy paste sandwich demonstrates how concentrated flavors helped compensate for quantity limitations during hard times. A small amount could create memorable, satisfying meals. Culinary anthropologist Sidney Mintz has documented how immigrant food traditions often adapted to American economic conditions, with anchovy paste being an example of how a traditional Mediterranean ingredient found new applications in American working-class kitchens. The next sandwich brings exotic spices to humble ingredients for maximum flavor. Curried egg sandwich. In Depression-era kitchens, curry powder was sometimes available as a small luxury that could transform the humblest ingredients. The curried egg sandwich combined hard-boiled eggs mashed with mayonnaise and a pinch of curry powder to create a flavor profile that felt exotic and special. Even a quarter teaspoon of curry powder could flavor several sandwiches, making it an economical splurge. The bright yellow color made the sandwich filling look richer and more substantial than plain egg salad. Some added finely diced celery or onion for crunch when available. The curried egg sandwich speaks to the importance of small pleasures during economic hardship, how a tiny amount of an aromatic spice could transport eaters beyond their circumstances, even briefly. Food historian Lizzie Collingham has traced how curry powder became available in American markets in the early 20th century, noting that by the Depression era it had become an affordable way to add interest to simple foods like egg sandwiches. Our next sandwich features a common vegetable in an uncommon way. Radish sandwich. When spring gardens produced their first harvest, the radish sandwich celebrated the return of fresh food after winter's preserved meals. Thinly sliced radishes arranged on buttered bread with salt created a peppery, crunchy sandwich that cost almost nothing. Kitchen gardens often included radishes as they grow quickly, providing early produce when other vegetables are still developing. The sandwich juxtaposed the sharp heat of radishes against the richness of butter, creating a satisfying flavor contrast. Some versions included a sprinkle of chives or parsley when available. The radish sandwich represents seasonal eating at its most basic, how the first garden harvests were celebrated as culinary events in themselves. Garden historian Thomas Mickey notes that victory garden pamphlets during both world wars specifically recommended radishes as first crops for novice gardeners, meaning this simple sandwich was often among the first fresh foods after winter. Could a sandwich be made from nothing but flavorful sauce? The next item shows how brown gravy sandwich. When meat was scarce but gravy remained, the brown gravy sandwich used bread to soak up this flavorful sauce, often made from Sunday roast drippings extended with flour and water. The gravy contained the essence of meat without requiring additional portions. Bread was sometimes toasted to better support the moist topping, which was usually served open-faced rather than between two slices. Some versions added a small amount of meat scraps or vegetables mixed into the gravy when available. Factory workers and farmers appreciated how this sandwich provided the satisfying taste of meat with very little actual animal protein. The brown gravy sandwich represents the careful preservation and use of flavor, even when substantial ingredients were lacking. Food historian Rachel Lorden has documented how gravy has historically served as a way to extend the flavor of meat across multiple meals, with the gravy sandwich representing the final extension, creating the experience of meat when none remained. The next item shows how garden vegetables could become hearty sandwich fillings. Garden vegetable sandwich. When home gardens produced summer bounty, the garden vegetable sandwich celebrated this temporary abundance. Thick slices of tomatoes, cucumbers, onions, and whatever else the garden yielded created a fresh, nutritious meal that required no cooking fuel. Dressed simply with salt and pepper, perhaps a spread of mayonnaise or butter when available, these sandwiches made use of produce that couldn't be preserved or stored. Some versions included lettuce leaves or herbs like basil or parsley. The garden vegetable sandwich represents the seasonal feast amid general scarcity, how summer's brief abundance was celebrated and enjoyed before returning to more limited winter fare. Agricultural historian Cynthia Clampett notes that even during the Dust Bowl and Depression, many families maintained small kitchen gardens that produced short periods of vegetable abundance, making these sandwiches seasonal treats. Rather than everyday fare, our next sandwich required saving special ingredients for rare treats. Apple butter sandwich. When fruit was too precious to eat fresh, apple butter provided sweetness throughout the year. Made by slowly cooking down apples with a small amount of sugar or molasses, apple butter stretched fruit across seasons for families who couldn't afford fresh produce year-round. Spread on bread, sometimes with a thin layer of actual butter when available, apple butter sandwiches provided the taste of fruit when none could be found. Some families reserved this as a special treat for Sunday afternoons or as an after-school snack. In Appalachia and the rural Midwest, community apple butter making was an autumn tradition, with families pooling resources to create large batches. Over outdoor fires, the apple butter sandwich represents community food security, how shared labor created preserved foods that sustained entire neighborhoods. Food preservationist Ann Mendelsohn has documented how apple butter making traditions spread across America, with German settlers who called it Apfelkraut becoming particularly important in regions where winter meant months without fresh fruit. The final sandwich on our list reminds us that sometimes the simplest combinations can be the most comforting: toast and gravy sandwich. When bread was going stale but couldn't be wasted, the toast and gravy sandwich transformed potential food waste into a filling meal. Stale bread was toasted until crisp, then covered with white gravy made from flour, milk or water, and fat drippings. Particularly popular in the South, this open-faced sandwich sometimes included black pepper or small bits of meat when available. The combination of crisp toast with creamy gravy created textural contrast that made simple ingredients feel more substantial. School cafeterias served variations of this through the mid-20th century, often called creamed toast, when made with milk-based white sauce. The toast and gravy sandwich represents the complete avoidance of waste, making satisfying meals from ingredients that might otherwise be discarded. Southern food historian Damon Lee Fowler has documented regional variations of this dish across the South, noting that it remained on family tables long after economic necessity passed, becoming comfort food that connected generations. These forgotten sandwiches tell America's hidden food history, how ordinary people weathered extraordinary hardship with creativity and dignity. They remind us that good food isn't always about exotic ingredients or elaborate preparations. Sometimes it's about making the most of what you have, finding comfort in simplicity, and sharing what little is available with those you love. Next time your grocery budget feels tight, instead of reaching for expensive ingredients, consider these forgotten classics. You might discover that between two slices of bread lies not just a meal, but a connection to the quiet heroism of everyday survival that defined much of American food history. If you enjoyed this journey through America's sandwich history, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the ingenious ways our ancestors made the most of what they had. Until next time, remember that some of the best traditions come from the hardest times.